Ultra running has been around for a long time, but only in the late noughties, tens, and in 2021, post and latter stages of the COVID pandemic, have we seen it made more widely available to more runners. A bit like this podcast, taking a passion and sharing it with others can be a huge risk. But for me, a fan of our sport, ultra running, I am very grateful to people who make this a reality. So let's meet one of those people making this possible. Hello and welcome to the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy. So hope everyone is well and your running is going well. So let's bring our guest today into the studio and let's welcome Ryk. Hello, Ryk. How are you?
Hi, Neil. Fine, thanks.
Good. Excellent. How's the running going?
Okay, yeah. Enjoying,
Good.
as always. Best activity you can do, in my view.
Love it. Straight in there with a positive. That's good. So just for our viewers and our listeners that don't know you, Ryk, tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, what's your kind of involvement in running, and what have you sort of done over your life as a sort of day job?
That's a big, long question, and we probably haven't got enough time in the whole podcast to discuss that. So I think probably the best thing to do is to say that I've been living in Yorkshire for the last 34 years and had a variety of jobs and careers. Now I'm sort of semi-retired. I suspect we'll probably touch on this in a bit, but in 2016 I collapsed and died from a heart attack, cardiac arrest, and sort of reevaluated things and decided that I'd start putting on ultra marathons. Now, going back a few years, when I was a teenager, I used to be a reasonably top orienteer in the southeast of the country, and I used to be secretary of our running club, fixture secretary, and I also used to organise events then for like 400 people, so no stranger to doing that. And I gave up on running for a number of years to bring up a family and do all those sort of things and go to work. And now they've all grown up, and I've decided that work isn't the be all and end all. And so I thought turn my hobby into and passion into something that everybody can enjoy.
Yeah, so let's unpack that a little bit then. So let's take me back to the cardiac arrest and the link to sort of your running journey and where that fell and you know what happened as a result of that.
Well, the quick preamble to that was I got to 39 and I'd always wanted to do a London Marathon. And every year I'd gone to enter it, I discovered I was too late. I'd missed the deadline for application. And I was sat there. One day I went to my in-laws to a barbecue and I forgot something. And I thought, I'll run home and get it. I lived less than a quarter of a mile away. I couldn't run to the end of the street. I was nearly 18 stone. And I thought, my God, what's happened to this guy that used to be a decent runner? Always been a better navigator than a speedy runner, but navigation was my passion. So I thought something's got to change here. So that summer I said, right, I'm running next year's London Marathon. So I found myself a charity place and started up a training program, which I won't go all through now, but basically I went from being nearly 18 stone and unable to run 50 yards to running that London Marathon. And that's where the journey started again in adult life for running. But then I discovered I didn't really like road running. It can be a bit boring for me. And when I got back from the London Marathon, I found that I hadn't really overextending myself. I thought originally that when I hit the wall, I'd sort of like get a nosebleed, pass out, and there's this terrible thing that was going to happen, and it didn't. And I got to the end, and the charity I was running for said, "Have you been round?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" They said, "Well, you still look fresh." So I got back home, and my neighbour said, "I've got a challenge for you. Why don't you run Hadrian's Wall?" So I did that a couple of years for charity, raised about £7,000 for the African Children's Choir. And so what happened after that was I then a few years later discovered that there was a race along the wall. So I did that for a couple of years. and very fit. I dropped down at this point to about probably about 13 and a half stone. And then in 2015, I saw the Ron Hill Run Every Day Challenge. So I started that up, and I decided to run 10K every day. And on day 113, having done, like on New Year's Eve, I'd climbed Ben Nevis with my wife, got down and run a 10K. Then the following day I did a 20-mile run around the lock that we were staying at. Fortnight later, I ran my fastest ever 10K. And then I was out doing a run, and 10-mile run, and less than probably 150 yards from home, I collapsed and died. And I was very, very lucky, because a passerby saw me fall, put me in the recovery position. Thought I'd just tripped over. The second person on the scene sort of said, "He's not breathing." So they flipped me on my back and started doing CPR. Not that either of them knew, but they started working on me. And then, well, it's a long story, but they managed to bring me back after a while. I stopped breathing 3 times at the scene, and again in the air ambulance on the way to hospital. It was a defibrillator that saved my life. And the next thing I knew was waking up 3 days later from a coma in hospital, and it was a genetic fault. So it was nothing to do with running whatsoever. In fact, they said that the running had probably saved my life, because I was fit and healthy. Had I have not been, it would have been very difficult to bring me round. And the surgeon jokingly said to me, well, he told me I needed a triple bypass. And he said, "I'm only going to give you a triple bypass if you promise you'll get back to ultra running. I'm not doing it for you to sit at home and watch Jeremy Kyle all day." So I said, "Deal." And my wife sort of looking, how on earth can you think about running when you're laid there with tubes coming out? So, and that was where that sort of reflection in hospital, I thought, do you know what? I wonder if I could organise one. And so that's what we did. I was just going to organise a couple on local trails. And my wife turned around and said, "You can't just do 2, you've got to do a series of 6. So we did 6 in the first year, and now we do 1 every month. And we've organised, I think the one this Saturday is our 43rd or 44th ultra. So that's the story going up to it all.
Excellent. So in terms of the races that you've participated in, obviously you mentioned the wall there. You know, a lot of people will know that race now. It's a sort of very popular race. And what races and distances have you personally taken part in then?
Okay. As far as ultras go, I've done most of the Hardmoors ones. So I've done, and I've swept the 110. So I tend to sweep more now, because since my heart attack, I also had an operation which removed all the cartilage on my right knee. So I'm in constant pain, and so I can't move very fast. So I tend to be the guy at the back, but I've got all the stamina in the world, so I can just keep going. So I've done all of those. I've done the wall a few times. I've done a couple of my own as well, and I test them all out in advance. And then the other race that you may or may not have heard of is one called the Spine.
Yeah, the Spine. And your wife, when I met you guys up in Nidderdale in 2021, your wife did tell me a bit of a story about this. So I wonder if you want to tell me about the Spine and see if you cover it.
Which one? Because I've done the Spine 3 times. So
I think it was something to do with that you were advised to drop out.
Oh, right. Yes.
You another 30 miles, maybe. I don't know.
Right. Well, that was the one last year, 2021. So in 2019, I did the full Spine, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Had an awesome time. And so I entered the following year, and I got to top of Kinder Scout after 5 miles. And just as we were going across the other side, I turned my ankle, and there was this really loud crack. And a runner 2 behind me said, "Have you just snapped your pole?" And I said, "No, that was my ankle." It was that loud. So
Wow.
I get down to the junction, and there's no medics there. And they said, "Well, what do you want to do?" So I got out some KT tape, bound up the ankle, because it was actually pressing against the side of my running shoe. It was actually quite painful. Well, it's very painful with what I'd done. And so I bound it all up and carried on. I got to Hebden after about 40 miles. And the medics there looked at it and said, "You really should be going to hospital with that. You've definitely got a grade 1 tear," or whatever it was, and it may even be a grade 2. I said, "Just patch it back up, I'll carry on." So I got to Malham Tarn, and at Malham Tarn, the medics had a look at me again, and I said, funnily enough, it's just stopped hurting, so I'm good to go. Went up Fountains Fell, no problem, and down the other side, and I'm going up Pen-y-Ghent, and it just went. And coming down the other side on those big steps down Pen-y-Ghent towards Horton, I lost the use of my foot. I couldn't raise it up or down, and the toes, I got no feeling in the toes whatsoever. At this point, it became sort of dangerous to move. I wasn't worried about the pain. It was just I couldn't move, so I dropped down to about 1 mile an hour. I worked out I could probably just get to Hardraw in time for the cut-off, but it would have meant going over Cam Fell, and if I'd have got any worse, somebody had to come and rescue me. And I thought, no, that's not fair. So I pulled out after 96 miles. So I did 91 miles with torn ligaments in my ankle, and the ankle was like twice the size. When I got to Hardraw, they looked at it and they said, how on earth have you actually walked on this, let alone done 90 odd miles? And so, yeah, there we go.
Wow. Stubborn approach, but
Absolutely.
sounds like a bit of an experience.
Oh, yeah. But what I always say about ultra running, I say there are 3 things you need for ultra running. And in order of importance, number 1 is the head. You have got to have the strength of mind to do it. If you haven't got that strength of mind, it's easy to drop out. So I can do lapped courses, loop courses, I can do anything. I've got that strength of mind, determination to keep going no matter what. And I think that is something that you really must have. And that's why I think you find that it tends to, not always, but tends to be an older person's sport, because those people have got the life experience and the determination to prove that they can do it. Whereas when you're younger, it's probably easier to drop out and think, I can do it another day, because you can. Second most important is nutrition. If you don't get your nutrition and hydration right, your body won't allow you to carry on. So that's number 2. And number 3, surprisingly enough, in my view, way down the list is fitness. Unless you want to win a race or come in the top 3 or so, you get the same medal and t-shirt or whatever they're offering for coming last as you do for coming 4th. So unless you're desperate for time and position, actual fitness isn't as critical. Stamina is, but not actual fitness. So I don't consider myself one of the fittest guys, just one of the most bloody minded, determined guys there is.
Yeah, love that. That's some really good points there, actually. And I like how you said that, like, in order of importance as well, because, you know, in the limited races that I've done, I would say that I completely agree with the first point. If you haven't got it, if it's not there in the mind and the head, you're not going to make it, are you?
It's so easy to talk yourself out. You know, when I'm going around, I hear myself saying, do you know what? I could actually cut across this field, or do you know what? I could cut this bit out, or do you know what? I could just go home now. And there's a bigger voice that says, you ain't doing that. That's not you. But, you know, you go through these scenarios, the longer and deeper into a race you get, but you also get more determined that you're getting closer to that finish line, and you ain't giving that up for anything.
Yeah, no, I think I do know that of you know, we're only a few episodes in really to the podcast itself, but what I do know is that some of the feedback we've had, we're looking at a lot of listeners here that are kind of starting their journey in this world. And, you know, I think to hear that information about those three important things that they need, that's going to be really helpful for people to hear. And I completely actually, you know, from my experience of coaching and running in the ultra world, I would say I completely agree with you. And I actually love your approach and attitude to that as well. So, yeah, no, really good that, Ryk. Thanks for that. Thanks for sharing that, because I think a lot of people don't really know where to start, but actually those 3 points alone is a good starting place. So excellent. So kind of the spine race itself is it's well known in our world, I would say. You know, perhaps if I said it to my mum, she wouldn't have a clue what it was. But, you know, in our world, you mentioned a spine race and people know what that is. So you were in there with some big names, I'm guessing, in the last one you were in there. There were some big famous names in there.
Well, the funny thing was, on the 2019 one, the night before, I was sat at the pub in Edale having a pint with this young lady. She told me her name was Sabrina Verigi.
Yeah.
the fastest time. And I was having a pint with her the night before.
Yeah.
And there was also a chap over from Sweden who was running effectively barefoot. I mean, he got like these sandals on, but he's almost barefoot. And he said, next time I come over, I bring my winter sandals.
Yeah. I think was John Kelly in that one as well, because I think he at the running show maybe in 2020 he talked about talked about Sabrina.
I did the summer one.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that was the winter one.
Yeah, the problem I've got is that I get very bad Raynaud's, and so if I'm if I'm out in an exposed area in winter and can't use my hands, that could be very serious, potentially fatal. It would be foolhardy to do so. So I mean, I have to run in poor weather with mittens. Well, I've got a pair of glove liners, furry lined mittens, and mittens are much better than gloves if you have circulatory problems, because if you've got gloves, your body's trying to warm each finger individually, whereas if you've got a mitten on, there's warm air passing between them, and they keep themselves a bit warmer. The other thing that I also put in is heat pads to try and keep my circulation going. But even during that spine, although it's the summer one and the kit list isn't as extensive, and in theory it's not as brutal, it can be. I remember leaving Dufton at midnight, going up Cross Fell, and in what other walk of life would I ever think of going up Cross Fell, the highest mountain in England outside of the lakes, in shorts, when the forecast at the top is 40-mile-an-hour winds, zero visibility. When I got up there, I had to layer up on the way up, but when I was in Dufton, it was still warm. And so I layered up, got up there, and all my electrics failed. So I had to get out my paper map and navigate the old way, which I can do. And I was down to Greg's hut. And because the path was so indistinct, it was almost impossible to follow. So anyway, I got us to Greg's hut. We bivvied there, and it was that cold. I was starting to get the shakes, and I thought, this is the early signs of hypothermia. So I said to the guy I was with, a friend of mine, Jerry, and I said, what we've got to do, jump back in our bags, get ourselves warm, because they're foil-lined bags, or at least just sort of get something going, and then pack our bags from within our bivvies, and then as soon as we get out, just get out and run, and just keep running to keep that core body heat going. And we ran and got below the cloud base, and it started to warm up, and we were fine. And the funny thing was that by the time we got to Alston, the next checkpoint, it was about 26 degrees, and I was starting to suffer from heat stroke.
Extremism in summer, love it, love
Yes.
that. And actually, the mitten thing there, actually, that's the first time. I mean, that what you've just said is when you say it, you go, oh yeah, that's really logical science. But actually, people don't really think like that.
No.
And that's a really good point with the mittens, because I think the Raynaud's, but lots of people are suffering from that. And actually, that little tactic when running, I wouldn't have even thought of that as a bit of advice to give someone. So that's a really good point. And also, like you said, and
also get heat pads easier into mittens than you can gloves, and you can actually fingers around them. Now, when you're running, you don't need to use your hands. You might need to stop to use them to use your watch or something. Yeah, you'll have to pull one glove out, try and leave it out for less than a minute, and just do what you need on your watch or your phone, and then bob it straight back in. It's for somebody that suffers with hand problems. It's the best solution I've found so far.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's great. That's great advice as well. So, so kind of let's move on from that, but know that in our minds then. So I would say from what you've told us there, you've got some massive experience throughout your life of navigating, doing various races, and clearly that experience is there. So just tell me a little bit about Panther events then. So this is you now, this is your events company. And what I'm really interested to know is sort of the why. What was the aim when you first set it up? How has that changed now? And why did you start it? It sounds like it's clear to me the passion's there, but where is it now? What's the future plans? All of those sorts of things. Because for me, going back to that intro that we said, you are you are someone that is now making this sport widely available to people and accessible to people as well. So, you know, a lot of questions there, but we'll unpack it. I'll let you have the floor and tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, okay. So I alluded to the fact that I'd had the heart attack and was thinking about what direction next in my life. And I've organised events before, so I'm no stranger to that. And basically, when I was doing races, the races when I was entering them, they were further north or in the northeast, and I thought there's nothing really that I'm aware of that's taking part in West and this side of North Yorkshire. There's not that much in the Dales. There's plenty of trail racing. There's plenty of fell running. There's plenty of road races, but I didn't see many ultras. Not that come across my radar. So I thought, well, why not? And I didn't know that. I thought at the time, well, there won't be many ultra runners around here, until I discovered that actually with each race, I discovered that there were more and more in this area. Now, whether it's they're finding out about us and then doing it, you know, from scratch, or whether they're existing runners that have just found that they can do it more locally, I'm not 100% clear on. But I basically started up because I enjoy running and I wanted others to enjoy running around here. There was nothing much on, and there's some awesome, fantastic scenery around here, as you'll have known from when you did the Nidderdale. That's a great course. And we also do the Dales Way and the Dales Highway. And I'm very fortunate because probably about 15 years ago, I met Colin Speakman, who is a good friend of mine, and he designed the Dales Way 52 years ago now, and he's still going strong. And it's because of visionaries like him that actually set down some of these long distance walks. And so I'm actually now a member of the Dales Way Association, and I'm on the committee for that. And they endorse our race. And one of their committee members then developed the Dales Highway, which is a brutal course. I then added a little loop at the end because it was a 90-mile course. And I'm always looking for doing sort of slightly unusual things and tweaking things. So like we've got an elimination ultra marathon. The one on Saturday is an out and back course, which a lot of people sort of balk at the idea of. But if you come and do this one, you'll find that the scenery is completely different on the return leg than the out leg. And it's we've had people get lost on the way back. You know, you think, well, you've gone down one path and you're coming back, and no, it's not as simple as that. So I always try and look for doing different things. But that, going back to that Dales Highway, we've only had, I think, only 4 people managed to complete the loop at the end, because you go from Saltaire to Appleby and Westmoreland, and then I put a 14-mile loop around High Cup Nick at the end, and that's a 2,500 foot climb after you've done 90 miles. And
oh wow!
I'd never get people to do things I wouldn't do myself. And people often say of my courses, if there are 2 options and you're not sure which way to go, and one of them's up, that's the way to go. Because I love hills. I love, climbing and that. So you get plenty of that. But we range from, we now do half marathons. So you can have a entry level trail race, or if you're injured, you can come back through a shorter race. So we run races from 13 miles to 113, and the longest one we do, which is the double Nidderdale, we've only had 2 people finish it in 2 years. So that's quite a challenge, and we're sort of throwing it out there to extreme ultra runners. This one plays with your mind, because you go around the Nidderdale Way twice, but the race starts in the middle. So it's like an hourglass. So you go out and back to your car, and then out and back to your car, and you do that 4 times. And so when you come in, and it's back end of October, and when you come back to your car, and it's raining, and it's dark, and it's cold, and you get in your car, and you think, do you know what? I've had enough. And that's when the head plays in. If you haven't got the head, you aren't going back out again. And that's what really sorts out the determined people from the not so determined. So that one's a great race. So we've got a great variety, and we do one race every month. So it started from a passion to get people running and to enjoy the local area so that I didn't have to go far. And I love designing courses. I'm forever tweaking the course each year. So it's rare that the course will be exactly the same year on year, unless it's on an existing trail. Otherwise, we're always looking at ways of improving it. And from that, 6 races was no problem to do. So eventually we've evolved to doing 1 a month, and we're loving it.
Yeah, so just to pick up on the Nidderdale a little bit, because so in 21, I was there with good friend and running friend Neil, also called Neil, and we were both there with our sons, and we were kind of driving around, finding where the course crossroads and villages so that we could get there and see our running club members that were running as a group of 6 ladies, and they were just doing the 28-mile loop, right? And what was really interesting is we came back to the finish line for them, which obviously was just the one loop, or the first loop for those that were going further on. And there were loads of people coming up to you, and I say it with a bit of a smile and a joke, that were literally saying, I'm not going to go back out today, Rick. I'm not going back out. And to sum that up, that was my first experience of your events. I should have been more involved before, but the pandemic saw to that. So, but I think on that finish line, it was just really interesting because all these people that actually, whether you follow them on Instagram or social media, or you've seen them at other races, that they have done big stuff, and they come back in, and that mind thing just sets in, and you could see it, and it was really good. And what was interesting about it is that we were like home the next day, and there was still one guy out there, and he was still out there trying to finish the full. And I got to be honest, it blew my mind. And the minute I realised that only 2 people had ever finished that in the 2 races that you'd previously ran, I would be a liar to say that's not on my bucket list, because it now is. But what I do know is that for someone who's in my position, I've done a 50 miler, a 35 miler, and a 70 miler. It's a long way off, and it's a long journey to get to somewhere like that. So when you just said about, reaching out to some of the more extreme ultra runners, I mean, that really is a top race, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's where we're sort of at the moment. It's interesting because we look at other races, and I've competed in many races. I've done a few other hundreds as well. And you look at the other races, and you see the number of people coming, and they're all desperate to do that. And you think, yeah, this is quite a tough race, but if you're wanting to do 100 and you're wanting to do a tough 100, there are others out there that perhaps aren't as commercial. And we're not commercial. We are going to be doing a bit more advertising and pushing to get the numbers up, to continue to make them viable. But we've always had a policy that if one person wants to run, we'll put the race on. And so even through the pandemic, we were able to put quite a few races on, not through the full lockdown, but when you were allowed to go out and run. Because we were small, we were able to continue. So we actually did manage to put on 8 races during 2020.
2020, yeah. The dates are all getting a bit mixed up, aren't they?
It's all sort of getting crazy, but so we weren't overly affected, and we were very lucky because we got quite a loyal bunch of runners. And for many of them, when we couldn't do a couple of the races, we then put them on at another time or transferred entries to other races. So we had you could count on the fingers of one hand the number of people that asked for a refund. Because we're small, we're friendly, we're able to accommodate and move people around, and so that helps. And the thing is, I'm a runner. I know exactly what it's like, what it feels like, and so that's part of where I've come from. And that's what I try and think. What would a runner want from a race director? What would a runner want from a race? And then try and deliver that.
Yeah, and I think when we were up at Nidderdale, I think there was 6 of our running club in that race, and I think 4 of them should have been doing the Bridge Too Far during 2020, but due to living in Cambridgeshire, we weren't able to do it in one day trip as such, and run an ultra in between. And they came back to that race. But I think a couple of the other runners have now done some of the other ones because they substituted into various, the Reservoir Dogs one, I think it is, or whatever you guys call that one. And they sort of substituted in, and we've had a good look at your events now, and we certainly, you know, our feedback to you is that from the care on the day to the actual picturesque courses, it's great fun, because even with my little 2-year-old son, we live in Cambridgeshire. It's a flat, boring place, and I think, you know, when we go somewhere like that with a 2-year-old, he's starting to see things that he's never seen. We're driving down hills that are like really high, and you know, it was a really picturesque from a kind of window seat point of view as well. Just supporting the team. But you know, in terms of being out there talking to the ladies when they finished, they loved it, and they loved the adventure side of it. And the 28 mile that they did was certainly something that for people that live in Cambridgeshire was a real challenge to them. But you know, for myself and a few others since then, we've talked about those further distances that you're putting on, and thinking actually these are bucket list races now. These are something we can build up to, and until we do it, we've got something to aspire to and set those dreams. So if you were sort of saying it sounds like to a new ultra runner, you guys would be a good place to come, because it looks like there's the next steps are always there for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do a race series of 6 races where they all start and finish in Artley. And for those, we actually tape the 13 mile, the 20 mile, and the shortest ultra distance, which is usually about 32 miles. So that will be fully taped. Most of them then have a longer ultra distance, and the bit where they separate off and do an extra loop or whatever, that won't be taped. You know, so there is a bit more there. So. But yeah, I think it's a great place to come. Just quickly moving back to the Nidderdale one, for this year, we've also organised that if people want to stay over in their motorhome or whatever, they can do. So if you're coming up from somewhere like Cambridge, we can accommodate you on the event field the night before, because it is an early morning start. But the reason for the early morning start, as I think you'll have seen, that head torch start as they all snaked out of the field was something out of this world.
Yeah, I mean, my little lad, he at the time was just about what was he, about two and a bit he was, and as they went up the hill with the head torches on, he's pointing, he goes, "Daddy, stars," and he thought it was stars because it was really picturesque, wasn't it? It was really cool.
Yeah, they're all stars, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. So, obviously you kind of touched on it, but the future plans are to perhaps get a few more people participating, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't want them to get too massive, because some of the areas we go on are areas of outstanding natural beauty, and I don't feel comfortable about putting like 1,000 people on something like that. So I think we're looking to try and get to somewhere between 200 and 300 per event within the next sort of 12 months. That would be nice if we could get there. But it's also great because it does mean that everyone can get into our races at the moment, whereas there are a lot of the bigger races where if you forget to log on, or you sat there logging on and you've got like a 1 minute window. I mean, I entered the Lakeland 100 a few years ago, and I was actually at the start of a race that was taking place at the same time that the ballot opened, and I'm sort of on the start line with my mobile phone trying to register for it, and I got in. But there is, you know,
there's a big demand for the big races, and actually, you know, events like yourself, like you say, you're able to get in at this stage, and I think, you know, we need that in the ultra world. This whole like 1% of people have run a marathon, you know, that must be growing now. Marathon running's becoming, in just the 12 years that I've been a runner, it almost has seemed, not just because I take part, but it seems to become more normal now, because a half marathon was big when I started. If you did one of those, you were a bit of a legend and you were great. But now, you know, that's kind of like people see a half marathon as a 10K, you know, similar to that. They then look at a marathon and they're doing that. But now these people, everyone seems to be looking for that next thing, that next step.
And the great thing about an ultra marathon is the challenge of an ultra marathon is that for most of them there is a variety of scenery. I mean, one of our races actually runs around an airport, Leeds Bradford Airport. Now, not actually within the perimeter, but around the perimeter fence, and that's actually a very challenging footpath because it gets very muddy. But also, it's another one of these things that can play on your mind, because you've got a 10-foot high security fence on both sides of you, and you're running sort of like it can be a little bit claustrophobic. Although they're both open fences and you can see for miles, you're actually running down this channel, and that can be a bit tough. That's on just one of the races, but we also go over Ilkley Moor, and we go over all manner of historic places around here, and we've just set up one this year where it goes from Bradford Cathedral to Ripon Cathedral, so it comes out of the sort of industrial side of West Yorkshire into the rural side of North Yorkshire, and the paths it follows on the way are stunning. So hoping that people will take up on some of those challenges. But the other thing that I would say is anybody that comes and does our races now, if we start to sell out, we will always look after those that were here first, you know. So if you've done it one year, we'll always make sure that you definitely can do it the next year if you want to.
Yeah, no, cool. That's cool. That's we're touching on Barkley Marathon style entry. Maybe one day you'll be that big. No, so
I tell you what, Barkley's that's an interesting one. Perhaps I could run one. No.
Yeah, I mean, actually, on that, you know, that to be honest, we are getting a few listeners that don't know a lot about the ultra world, and they probably don't know what we mean. But just as a quick fire question, when you saw all that commercialization of the Netflix film and everything else of the marathons, did you look at it and go, "Oh yeah, I'd love to"?
Did I look at it? No, I didn't, because I don't like commercial stuff, so I didn't actually look at it. So I've not seen it. I've seen videos about the Barkley Marathons. I tend to watch stuff on YouTube and little clips, so I'm fully aware of what the Barkley Marathon is and what it does. And there's a part of me that thinks, yeah, I'd like to give that a go. Problem is, I'm not fast enough. I could do the navigation, not a problem, but I wouldn't be able to do it quickly enough. And I think that's the challenge for me. But some of the things around it is quite appealing. And my elimination race, that's one where basically you all do a loop and you get back, and the last one back gets eliminated. And you do just 3 left, and those 3 can just keep going as they want. But if you do a loop and you finish early, you can go back to your car and rest up and wait for the others to come back. But the downside is you might be resting too much, and you don't know when the next lap's starting, because you don't know when the last person's finishing. So there's a little bit of that in there. So what happens is when the last one comes in, you then put a call out, right, next lap starting in 5 minutes, and, you know, shout it around the car park. And if you're not on the start line, that's your fault.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I like that concept. That's like you said, but there's a lot of things going on there. Mindset, you know, the pace that you run at, all of those things. They can be, you know, like you say, your involvement in ultra running isn't all, you know, all about the speed and everything else. But like you said, there are people that like that competitive element still within the ultra world. So go on then, a few questions to finish us off then.
Well, very quickly, how many sports are there where you can compete in the same race? And it's also true of the marathon, London Marathon, although in the London Marathon they do have an elite start. We tend not to have an elite start in ultra running. You can be actually on the front line of the race with the top runners in the world.
Yeah.
And I do know that at the Nidderdale, one of our runners, who's not one of the fastest runners, he deliberately got to the front of the pack and sprinted out of the showground, so that he was leading the race as he went out the showground.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. And I do like that about the sport. You know, there is no segregation as such. You are running with the top runners if they are at that race. And, you know, there are certainly more and more of those coming to light with the world, and the world of sponsorship in the ultra world as well has increased. And, you know, people having actual athletes now that are sponsored by various brands and running and representing teams. And, you know, I'm all for the growth of our sport, and I think, you know, people like yourself are making it possible for us to actually take part as well, which for me is also important in any sport at the grassroots level, that there is entry points for people. And, you know, you've got right across the board at the minute, you've got the kind of top race that's going to be really hard, and you've only got 2 finishes, but you've also got those entry point races as well, which, you know, without those, how can anyone ever be ready for the big races that they may aspire to do, having seen them in the media or on YouTube? So yeah, so a few questions for you, Ryk, that
Very quickly,
go on.
point about entry level. and only 2 people finishing our toughest course, we've actually had a race with over 100 people start with 100% finishers.
Wow.
So if you look, that's on the, so if you're looking at that, our races go from being good starter races that are easy, as easy as running 32 miles can be, the really challenging stuff that I'll challenge you to finish. So we do the whole range, and I think that's important. Anyway, your questions.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it is really important, and I do love that about yourselves. So, when you got into this, obviously you've answered this question, but I like to ask every guest this question. Was it when you were a runner, were you inspired by something you saw in the media? Did you know someone else that was doing it, or was it kind of the natural next step for you in your running career to start ultra running? I'm guessing the cardiac arrest played a massive part, as you've mentioned.
Well, there are 2 factors. The thing that got me back running, which I sort of alluded to, was the fact that I was overweight and unable to run. And actually, there was a there's an advert at the time on the TV where there was his father watching the telly, and his daughter, I think it was, came up and drew a picture of this big fat man. And basically, the whole advert was look after your heart. If you don't, you'll die, sort of thing. That's the sort of idea behind it. I can't remember it so much now, but I remember that advert suddenly frightened me into thinking that's me. I've let myself go from being somebody that was slim and able to run relatively fast and successfully to somebody that's a couch potato. So that was point 1, that advert, and my life experience. And then the bit that turned me on to the ultra running was having done the London Marathon. Actually, the full story was halfway around, I got cramp and I had to sort of walk it in. And that was where the determination came in. I walked it in. And so although I found that I could sprint as well, it was just my running muscle that had gone. So sprinting and walking was fine. So every now and again I'd sprint and I'd start overtaking people and they'd say, "Did you start late?" It was when I got back home and my neighbour said, when I said to him the next morning, I wasn't stiff at all. I said, "Well, I didn't feel like I did anything yesterday." And he said, "You need a bigger challenge. Why don't you go and do Hadrian's Wall?" Because he'd just seen it on the telly on one of these like country file programs, and they just reopened the Hadrian Wall walk. And so it's my neighbour who then challenged me to do that. And he said, "Would you do it for charity? For the African Children's Choir?" So that was the sort of transition from doing the marathon that I'd always wanted to do to then doing ultra marathons.
And in terms of your experience of ultra world, what is the worst thing that you've experienced during an ultra marathon?
The worst thing I've experienced during an ultra marathon? Good grief.
Put you on the spot there.
Yeah, I know. It depends on what you term. Depends on what you term as worst. I mean, I've had. I think probably the worst from the point of view of injury was I was having problems with my knee. I had 3 accidents as a child. Once, well, as a teenager. Once was while skiing. I went over on my knee and snapped the tendon. Well, did some damage to it. Another time I fell off my bike and landed on my knee, and another time I was running, fell over, and landed on my knee. So that's what buggered my knee up. And we were doing some speed training with our running club, and I sped down this hill about 6-minute miles, or even slightly faster. It's 5:45 or something stupid because it's so fast downhill. And I felt fantastic. And the following day, my knee was agony, and I'd got a 110-mile race coming up. Got 40 miles into it, descending down some steep steps at Runswick Bay up in the northeast, and my knee went. And I had to drag it across the sand. I was actually literally dragging my knee behind because it just wouldn't move. The checkpoint was at the top of the cliff the other side. The previous year it had been at the bottom. So it took me about an hour and a half to get from where I was to the top. I got there and there's like tears of pain in my eyes. And the marshal said, "You're not going anywhere." I said, "I can't go anywhere." And my knee was just like a balloon. And so I had to have it put into a cast. I had to go straight to hospital on that. So that's probably the worst moment because that was agony. But I suppose you said during an ultra, didn't you?
Yeah, during an ultra, yeah. So
during running was when I collapsed and died.
yeah. No, I mean, what's it like to die?
Right, that's something that quite a few people have asked me, and I'm going to disappoint you. So, or perhaps reassure you, in that when I collapsed, I don't remember anything for about half an hour beforehand. Okay, so I can remember going out for the run. I can remember going through Wharf Meadows Park in Otley and a dog actually accidentally running up beside me and brushing a stick against my leg and cutting my leg. And so I ran faster to get away from this dog. And I remember going a different way back. And I remember all but about the last half hour. And a friend of mine who I think he's a surgeon, he said that you've got a short-term memory and you don't get your memory until after 30 minutes or so. So I didn't remember any of that. So when I woke up in hospital, like I said earlier, I was high on morphine. Wonderful place. So I didn't know anything about it. And I had no memory in between at all. So the one thing I would say, the reassuring thing for people is that if somebody does die in a traumatic way, they won't have known about it. Their memory, it won't be in their memory. They won't have suffered. So I didn't suffer at all, even though it was a very traumatic thing. No,
Really, really interesting to get that feedback, actually, because I think, like you said, you've been asked it a lot, and as soon as you said it, it was in my mind to ask you what was it like to die, and what you've just said is really, like you said, almost in a way the reassurance of it.
peaceful, peaceful, traumatic, peaceful.
No, that's cool. So this one might be hard. Favorite race?
Mine or others?
Wow, yeah. Anything you've taken part in, really. Give us both. Give us your favorite race that you put on, and favorite race you've taken part in.
The favourite race that we put on, I think, has got to be the Dales Way, because it's accessible. The scenery is brilliant. It's not difficult. It can be a bit wet underfoot. It's a huge challenge, but coming from the Lake District to Ilkley, 82 miles, it's a great event, and it's an overnight event, and I think it's a really good one for people that are wanting to push on. And it's a great challenge to organise because you have to speak to so many people to get it going. Race taken part in, and that's difficult. I think there's two. So one is I did the Ultra Trail d'Angkor in Cambodia, which was around the temples around Angkor Wat. You start in Siem Reap and go around that area. That was absolutely awesome to do. But actual challenge-wise, I mean, of everything I've done so far, it would have to be the Spine.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Both of those sound, the Spine is on the bucket list for me, but the other one as well. That sounds really cool and something. I mean, would you have been there otherwise if you weren't a runner?
Well, the funny thing was that this was after my heart attack. So we actually sat down and wrote a bucket list, my wife and I, as to places in the world we'd like to visit. And number 2 on both of our lists was Cambodia. We both wanted to go to see Angkor Wat. And funnily enough, about, I think it's something like November time, Bev said to me, I think I know what I'm going to get you for Christmas. And I said, I think I know what you're going to get me for Christmas. And she said, you are? I said, well, you're looking at Facebook, aren't you? I said, I've just had an advert come up on my Facebook account, and it's for an ultra marathon in Cambodia. And she said, oh, we both had the same advert, and she wanted to go. So this is an even better story than mine. I mean, I went and finished it. We did it on the anniversary. It was the anniversary of my heart attack. So it was exactly a year to the day. So it was perfect sort of comeback after the heart attack. But Bev entered it was the 20k race, I think it was, 10-mile race. Sorry, 10-mile race. That was it, 10-mile race. But just before we flew out, she broke her foot on the Hardmoors New Year's Day race. Just a few hundred meters into the race, she went down a pothole, broke her foot. Anyway, she managed to take off the pot. These days when you get a pot, it's one of these boots. So she was able to take the fly. And so I went off to do my 40 miler, and comes back. and Bev's only gone and done her 10 miler with a broken foot.
Wow.
And 10 miles, it was 16 miles. So she got to 10 miles and thought, oh, I've done it. Where's the finish line? And it was another 6 miles on.
Miles, yeah.
Yeah,
That's
so
cool.
awesome performance by her.
No, that's cool. So last question then. What does running mean to you?
What does running mean to me? I could be over dramatic and say life.
I'd agree with that, actually.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't think that was over dramatic, but actually, yeah, yeah.
Bev's actually just come back in and she's shouting up to me hope, and she's right with that as well. It's the hope. It's the fact that I've been able to get back to it. But for me, I think the actual thing is to be out amongst nature. I don't run with headphones. I want to hear what's out there. I want to hear the beauty of nature. I like to be away from cars, from traffic. Actually, I like to be away from people. So I love being out on the moors on my own, at one with nature. And it's peace, it's tranquility, it's beauty, it's just everything. And I can't personally understand people that say, what on earth are you doing that for? I'm doing it because it's the best thing in the world. And it really is something that you can just sort of sit back and enjoy and relax, and just, it's everything.
Yeah, no, great answer, really nice answer. I agree with so many aspects of that. One of the main points there that you pointed about is the headphones. I have done it in the early part of running. You know, when I first did it, I think, you know, iPods were a new thing at the time, and it was cool to do that and whatever. So I get it, but after about a year, I think it was, I probably gave it up, and I haven't put a headphone back on since. Not even in this world of podcasts, you know, where it kind of makes sense to go for a run and listen to a running podcast, but actually I don't even do that. So I get you, and I get the whole bit there. And actually your one word answer, life, is I'm not quite sure what I would, if I included talking to people like you today as part of my running journey and part of what running is to me. If I didn't have running, I'm not sure where I'd be in life. And you know, you're saying it's life, and I get that as well. So yeah, no, awesome. So if people want to have a little look at what you do, and
Yep.
and where can they find that? I will stick your website in the description on this podcast as well, so everyone can just look at the description. But where can they find out about it?
Yeah, www.punkpanther.co.uk.
Nice and simple. Excellent.
And,
so,
and if anybody's up for gentle running, I'm happy to go out with people, and quite often do. Just out of interest, next month I've got set myself a little challenge: Yorkshire 3 Peaks 4 times in a row.
Wow.
And apparently that's not been done before, so that's something to try for.
So you could be the first person, right?
I've got a few of us. There's a few of us going to go around. We've got a support team, and we've managed to get a chap who owns a barn to let us use it for the use his garage on the course as a sort of a base that we can go out of, so that we've got a bit of shelter and somewhere where we can get a bit of where we can boil a kettle and things like that. So yeah, looking forward to that, and got loads of challenges like that. Love doing them.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Brilliant. So thanks for coming on, Ryk. That's been really, really kind of informative as well as fun. So and some stories in there that are really quite serious as well. So it's been a great interview with you, and I've really enjoyed asking those questions and actually learning a lot more about you and your journey, which has been really cool. So we'll say goodbye for now, Ryk, but hopefully me and you will clearly meet again in person, and we can always have you back on the show to talk more in the future, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, you know, you're welcome. Enjoyed it.
Excellent. So guys, if you did enjoy Ryk's interview, do give us a rating, do give us some feedback on the comments in whichever platform it is you are listening or watching. And if you thought there were parts of that would be really useful for other runners, please do share this episode with them, because Ryk made some really good points. So I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope we can meet here again to discuss more on the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy.